This morning's Dharma talk the topic will be on the three jewels, or the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, which are, very simply put, it's just a way or a structure that is used in Buddhism pretty much universally. I mean, probably areas where it's not emphasized, but the idea that a way of studying this, the spiritual path, which is basically non-theistic. When I say non-theistic, it doesn't rule out or disbelieve in a God or a creator situation. That would be foolish to do that, to push that away. It just doesn't emphasize that. What it does emphasize is your personal path, your psychological, spiritual training. This is basically what it's about. It's like a school. And the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, what we conventionally do, you can do that just yourself. You can say, I take refuge, or I'm changing my allegiance over from this material world of trying to get as much as you can for yourself, and in other words, struggling, a materialistic approach, sometimes called the 8 worldly dharmas of praise and blame, success and failure. Nothing wrong with those. It's just that if you emphasize that too much, then it doesn't work so well, because we don't have that much control over what's going to happen in our lives. Things can come out of nowhere and make it difficult. So if we're operating out of winning and losing, probably you're going to get a little of each. So what we do in this particular tradition that started 2,500 years ago with the historical Buddha, who discovered something about the nature of life, living, being a human being, and that it was full of problems, discontent. And so his way of working with that is to try to find out, how do we do that? And he discovered in his meditation, sitting down, trying to see what the mind was doing, he discovered that basically caused by grasping, by clinging to things, hanging on to things, fixating on things. And so he wasn't so much about promoting some kind of belief in something. It was very pragmatic. When the Buddha was asked us, who created all this, he was silent. Not because he didn't have some speculations himself, he probably did. But my feeling, and this is speculation, but the way it looks to me is he probably thought it would be best to emphasize what people should really be working with, and that's their mind. And so the structure, Buddha, I take refuge in the Buddha, take refuge in the Dharma, take refuge in the Sangha. Like I said, you can do that just yourself and practice, study Buddhism on your own. You can also, if you need to, have more, as I call it, glue, and take refuge with a preceptor or a teaching person. I actually end up sewing one of these things called a raksu, which represents the robe of the Buddha. And you can even go further and become fully ordained as a monk, as I have, as Sokuzan has, as Jason has, and my wife, Unyo. But that's very personal. It's not something that we promote. We don't try to sell somebody on this. It's up to you. I'm here to help you with that, but not promote it. So when we take refuge, we're actually leaving, to some extent. We have to stay here and have a job, make a living. We're changing our allegiance over from the 8 worldly dharmas, again, the push me, pull you ones, to the Buddha Dharma, or the path of liberation from the suffering. And one of the things that we can do to help us focus and stay on task, on track with that, is to formally take refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. This is what this prostration this morning, for those of you who are in the Zendo, this is what this prostrating and chanting was all about. It's another way of just using the body, speech, mind to keep you on track, to bring your awareness to that situation over and over again. So when, just like Sokuzan, who was the Doan or the chant leader this morning, talks about, if she's looking at the chants, if the vision gets a little fuzzy there, then you realize that you really haven't memorized that. Which I don't know anybody. Have you memorized it? So I don't know anyway. Ryoka, was he able to do it in the Doan seat or just the Doshi? Yeah. Well, Doshi seat's easier because you have someone leading it. So anyway, the idea here is with the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha is you can do that formally. You can take refuge with a preceptor, in which case that person or that teaching person will change, give you another name, And so then you can use that as another reference point. You can still use your given name. You can do whatever you want. Other than when you're practicing here, you're required to use, I require you as a teacher to use your Dharma name. Otherwise, why do it? So refuge means that you're a refugee from the 8 worldly dharmas. So just a way of talking about another conceptual idea. So we say, I take refuge in the Buddha as the example. In other words, the example of someone who, you get lots of ways of saying what he's an example of. I like to say he's an example of someone who is sane. He actually had stopped fighting with the world. He stopped fighting with everything. He was no longer at war with his own mind or with anybody in his community. This doesn't mean that he didn't get upset with somebody or say, hey, clean up your act. Because he would have said that in Sanskrit, or Pali, rather. He would have said, clean up your act. So it's the Buddhism is quite often called the middle way, not too tight, not too loose. So a little bit. We know we don't really fixate on one side or the other. It's difficult to do, and that, as far as I can see, that can only be done with really strong awareness. So refuge in the Buddha is the example of someone who had realized the nature of who he was and what the world was, and had an understanding that began to transcend the clinging and the grasping and the warfare and the kind of warfare mentality that we see all over the place. So if you just watch the news for 10 minutes, and even highly educated, sophisticated people are at war on some level, are fighting with each other. And, it's like, just to use an example, the terrible people who are completely confused and suffering called ISIS, or ISIL on ISIS. My idea here would be why don't we negotiate with those people? When I say negotiate, I'm just saying, let's talk with them a little bit and see what we can do to settle this incredible issue of hatred another way. Let's try to do this, work on this together. So, and no, I'm not running for office. But it just looks like, it just kind of seems like, why wouldn't we try that first rather than just send drone planes and kill people that we don't know? So that's enough of my political commentary. So refuge in the Buddha means that it's not that you believe in the Buddha or disbelieve or that you're no longer could be a Christian, or that you're opting for some particular way that closes everybody else out. It might be more inclusive than you think. So you could formally do that. I take refuge in the Buddha, take refuge in the Dharma or the truth that he taught. I take refuge in the Sangha or the community. So there's the Buddha, who's the example. There's the Dharma, which is what he talked about and what he discovered. And there's the Sangha, or the community of people. Like, as long as you're in this room, you're part of that community. As far as I'm concerned, there's no boundary to this community. It's everywhere. This is the entire world. It's entire everything. There's no boundary. Even aliens. Include, don't fight with them. Don't fight with anything. Don't fight with anything. How do you learn to do that? Stop fighting with yourself. You can't stop fighting out there unless you stop here, because what will happen is the warfare in here, if you begin to lose it, or if you begin to get threatened, you'll project the enemy out on others and you'll start to fight with them. How do we deal with that? The only way, it seems, I'm not here necessarily to fight with you, but I'm presenting. You're here, you're sitting in this room, so I have permission, at least for the next 45 minutes, to talk to you a little bit about what I've understood and discovered in the last 75 years. Not for everyone to do, but it was for me. This has basically helped me stop, first of all, fighting with myself, and then hopefully begin to help others to understand that also. It's a very simple way of putting it. It's not about which path of Buddhism is right or which path of anything is right or wrong. It's about what actually you resonate with. I would say, as far as the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, like I said before, I think that if you needed to do this more than just read about it or think about it, then you would probably be drawn in that direction. The refuge in the Buddha is the example. So that example can be the historical Buddha that you read about. That nothing, we don't really know for sure what happened. We know because everything was written down 100 years after he passed. And then that's been translated, and there's scholars who go back and study the Pali in the original languages and translate that. And I think there was the first council after he passed, there was a lot of disagreement about what the teachings actually were, and they broke up. Does anybody know how many different schools there were? Lots of them. I think there was 18 in the Hinayana, or the early teachings of Theravada, the school of the elders. So anyway, it was complicated, and people would have different ideas about how to present what it was that he was teaching. And this shows you just, my goodness, how many different ways, the different personalities and different understandings and so on. No right or wrong to it. So refuge in the Buddha would not only mean refuge in taking refuge or going to that example, an example of somebody who was sane. As far as we know, probably was somebody back there. We wouldn't have all this history. So, but we would go to that and see how did he live? What did he do? What was his life about? What he pretty much gave up his life to help people. And who was he helping? A whole bunch of teenagers. Those are the people who came probably in that ancient India when there was a strong spiritual basis to ancient India. Any spiritual path was very much supported culturally. But probably most of his monks, thousands of them, were people that were, maybe their parents wanted to have their sons get some training, so they sent them to the monastery. Who knows? It's hard to say. So refuge in the Buddha would be the historical Buddha as we understand him and read about him and what he said and so on. And also refuge in the teaching person. It's not that the teaching person has the kind of teaching power that the Buddha had, probably not. But it's out of their understanding. So it's like a person who, anything you study, it's good to study with somebody who's been doing it a little bit longer than you have, and possibly even has realized something deeply what it was the Buddha taught. Every teaching person who understands, studied Buddhism and begins to teaches out of their understanding of what's been taught, the actual concepts, all the different, and there are lots of them in Buddhism, lots of concepts. The Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the 12 links on the chain of existence, the 6 realms, the 3 realms, and on and on and on. You could go. There's lots of teaching structures, concepts. So, and then the refuge in the Buddha, or the teaching person, him or herself, and then refuge in the Dharma, or that which is being taught. Not only the historical teachings, which sometimes people get so stuck to the historical teachings, they don't look around to see if there's someone actually who's alive, who's presenting what this understanding is. And then you get a combination of someone who's able to relate to you personally and see what it is that you personally need, as far as the chemistry you need, as far as the feedback you need, how much or how little, and actually kind of like you can read about surgery, but if you need surgery, you probably should see a surgeon, and do it yourself. Open heart surgery doesn't work. You have to have somebody else. It's always about cooperation. I like to say the 3 C's: communication, cooperation, and compassion. Well, they don't function independently. They have to be all have to be there for that to happen, for there to be some kind of fundamental help. We're a community, whether we like it or not. The whole world is one big community. It's just to be broken up, and it's like a whole lot of kids in a sandbox, a lot of 8-year-olds. So refuge in the Buddha. I take refuge in the Buddha as an example of someone who is not fighting with himself anymore, or anyone else. I take refuge in the Dharma, or as the truth that he taught. The way that we do that here at this Sokuzan Buddhist temple monastery. We have temple residents who live here. We have people who come and go for anywhere. We've had people stay here for a whole year. Recently, we had people, a monk, Mado, come from Pennsylvania and spend 3 months practice residency here, practicing every day. And our required sitting is 6.5 hours a day for a temple resident. So we're not messing around. If you come here and practice, you're going to practice a lot. You're going to do a lot of sitting meditation. You're going to do a lot of study. And the study isn't just what I'm saying. I mean, there's dozens of recordings of my understanding of this, but we also study traditional texts. In other words, Buddha is the example. I do my best to present myself as a teaching person, and I'm not too much into promoting this. But if the chemistry is there, or the frequency is there, then you'll know. And so if you leave, I'll say, good luck. If you stay, I'll say, how can I help you? And the response you get to your question may not be the one you would like. So just to give everyone an idea, the books that we study from Monday through Saturday are The Natural Perfection, Longchenpa, the 14th century Tibetan master. Longchenpa's Radical Dzogchen. What's the title of that book?
Natural Perfection.
Natural Perfection. So that's from the Nyingma lineage of Tibetan Buddhism. And we study Progressive Stages of Meditation on Emptiness by Khenpo Sotrim Gyaltso, a Tibetan monk who is still alive. And that's a book that we study 2 hours, 2 separate times each week. And that's a powerful interpretation of the teachings and different stages of emptiness, understanding. And then we also study Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism, which is a book of talks by my teacher, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche. And we've been studying that. I've been studying that with a group for 40 years. That's how important that book is. Very, very important. It's very important to sit down and talk with other people also studying. So you have the example, the Buddha, the teaching person. Then you've got the teachings themselves. The Dharma, which Dharma is a Sanskrit word that means truth or law or form. You get the Buddha Dharma, which is the Buddhist teachings. You can have the Dharma of auto mechanics, which is just the way you work in cars, which is getting more and more complicated. You have to be a computer programmer. So Cutting Through Spiritual Materialism has been out since 1972. And a very good book. I highly recommend it to anyone. It is both an advanced book and a beginning book at the same time. Another book is Treasury of the True Dharma Eye, the Shobo Genzo of Zen Master Dogen. And we use the Kazuaki Takahashi's translation. There's several of them. I think you can get that one online.
Not that translation.
Okay. Then Natural Perfection again on Thursdays. Friday, Buddhist Phenomenology, a philosophical investigation of Yogacara Buddhism and the Chenwei Shilan. This is by Dan Lusthouse, and this is of all the things we're studying, this is one by a Buddhist scholar. It's a very difficult text, but it's very good to talk with others about this. And read this on your own. You may be incredibly gifted and be able to understand what he's saying. If you have a scholarly like mind, or conceptually, you may be able to grasp abstract concepts very well and see how they fit together or how they don't fit together. So it will give you a headache. Read it, maybe, and maybe not. So, but even someone Lamado, who was here, like I said, for 3 months, she had difficulty with it, and she has a PhD in philosophy. So that gives you a little bit of an idea. Buddhist Yoga, the comprehensive course translation of the Samdi Nirmochana Sutra. Besides the Buddhist Yoga by Thomas Cleary, we also use 2 other translations of that ancient sutra that was probably written somewhere in the first, the 2nd or 3rd century of the Common Era. And so the other 2 that we also use is one by John Powers, which is a translation out of the Tibetan, and also the Keenan translation. What was Keenan's first name? Huh? John Keenan. Okay. So anyway, we do this, and every now and then I'll change one of these out for another text. So there's always something changing a little bit. We spent a whole 1.5 years studying the Agamas, the Majjhima Nikaya specifically, and the Digha Nikaya.
Just the Majjhima
Nikaya. So I guess what I'm trying to say is this is how I would describe so studying what the Buddha taught, the Dharma, and these are Buddhism is a cumulative tradition more so than a revealed tradition. Revealed means someone, a deity, or his messenger or son came from somewhere and showed up and said, "This is what the nature of things are, and this is what you need to subscribe to." And I would say, if you connect with that, that's your path. So they're not a right or wrong. You need to look here and see, what do you really need to help you live a sane, uplifted, kind, spiritual life, a life that has some depth to it and has as its basis, I would say, kindness to yourself and to others. If you're not kind to this direction, it's going to be very difficult. You can do it out here as long as the people are friendly, but as long as somebody starts getting unfriendly, it's difficult to be kind or respectful to them. We tend to want to fight with them or make them change. And so also the study that we do, talking more about Sangha, this is available if someone wants to study this on the phone. We have a conference line and people are certainly invited. They can contact her numbers is on the website. And you can get the number and the call for the code. We have people calling in from a long ways away, San Clemente, California. So Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. I guess I could take some questions on that. Sheldon?
Well, I think of the word refuge.
Yes.
That makes me think of being protected.
Yes.
In what way is this protection?
Well, it's beginning to protect your mind so that you actually have a form, not a belief. A belief is something you think is true with no proof. But if you know something, you don't need proof. And if somebody says, "Well, how do you know that?" You can even say, respectfully, say, "I'm not sure how I know that." And they say, "Well, do you believe that?" If you ask me that, I will say, "I neither believe it nor do I disbelieve it." Very interesting. That's not a cop-out. It's like the example I'm always using is inventing something. I can make up anything out of. If I said there's a giant condor, purple one, on the roof right now, do you believe it or disbelieve it? And I say, don't do anything with it. You don't have to believe it or disbelieve it for it to be so or not so. You can actually, when you believe something, this is what it looks like. You believe because you see what you believe. And when you disbelieve something, you also have this. But if you don't do either one, then your awareness, your perception, your thinking process, the five skandhas, form, feeling, perception, concept, and consciousness, are actually open and they're searching. Or they're not searching, they're just observing what's arising. Sometimes we're searching, sometimes we're just observing what's passing by, like watching clouds. And sometimes we're trying to find the right cloud or the wrong cloud. Sometimes we're sorting. Personal joke there, sorting. We have a lot of things to sort. So more protection. So protection, it gives you a dynamic or a form for a way to, otherwise we're just free floating through our life, which isn't wrong. It's just that when we do that, we tend to try to grasp at things we believe and reject things we don't believe. And I'm not saying that's wrong, but that would put me in the category of actually of going against what I just said. You have to disbelieve it or believe it. You have to do either one. And so the protection part, I think, would come in that you would have a form of working with your mind, a way of working with the mind. So when negativity comes into your mind, that you would have a way of accommodating it without fighting with it. Most people are fighting with the negativity. And so they go to the doctor, and the doctor does what? He or she puts a big lid on top of their negativity. Not wrong. I'm not saying this is wrong. This is just a way of dealing with the suffering. So I would say, if someone said, "Do you think I should take Prozac or Wellbutrin?" or what, I don't know. What do you think? Well, I think I have to take it. And I said, well, then you don't need me. Do whatever you need to do. Help yourself. Do what you need to do. But if you come back and say, well, I don't really want to take that because it makes me feel this way or that way too, and it doesn't really get rid of my depression, then I would say, well, do you meditate? And they would say, no. I said, well, do you want to learn? Well, maybe. So, it's a situation like that. So it's like the protection part would come in, not so much that, oh, now I have this belief, so that'll protect me. It's more that I have a very practical, pragmatic way of working with the things that arise in my life. It's probably not going to protect you from, someone with an AK-47 coming after you, but it might help you at least not go to war with them. I mean, you might actually be able to talk to them about it and say, can't we do something else other than this? But if you get out an AK-47 too, all options are closed. The only option you have is to shoot him or her first, or else let them shoot you. But does that make sense on some level? And is there some specific area you were talking about protection?
Well, yeah, I guess speaking from my motivation to come here originally,
Yes.
Which was, I guess, was taking refuge. Just coming here was taking refuge.
It is. Yeah. It is a refuge.
And, it was a place to come to.
Yeah.
But I feel less protected now than I did when I came here.
Yes. May I help you with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. The feeling less protected is feeling more vulnerable because you've been doing a lot. You've been coming here, 4 years? 3, 5 years. Okay. And so doing sitting meditation. And what sitting meditation tends to do is to take away the artificial boundaries, we call ignorance, away, so you can't ignore your vulnerability so much anymore. You're more aware how vulnerable you are. So in the short term, that can be uncomfortable. But in the long term, you're at least looking at something that is true rather than looking at some kind of a wall that you've put up to protect you from things. So it's called the path, the Buddhist path. We tend to feel more and more vulnerable, but you're not going to experience any more vulnerability necessarily than you can actually handle. So what I would say is sit more. But more about that. There's more there if you want to ask.
I can't think of anything right now.
Okay. You feel less protected?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You're wrong. I mean, however you feel is genuine. That's your feelings that we work with there. But let me say this: you seem a lot more clear to me today than you did 5 years ago about what's happening in your life. You no longer have. Can I comment on your situation, Chief? You no longer have the addictive behavior that you used to have. Have you noticed that?
Not really.
Well, to the extreme that you were involved is what I'm talking about. Well, you and I should talk. Yes.
A question from Maggie over in Ann Arbor.
Maggie.
She asks, how do we stop fighting with the unconscious parts of us that are warring with us?
Yes. So Maggie is a student of mine that's been practicing for, 20 years or something like that, a long time. And she's been a student of mine for a shorter time, but just finished a 10-day solitary retreat. I don't think she'll mind me commenting on that. And quite often what happens when we meditate is we begin to see, as Maggie is seeing, and anyone who practices, we start to go deeper down into this. And Sheldon, in his situation, is experiencing maybe more sensitiveness to everything, so feeling at least maybe more threatened. What that really shows up is that you haven't really resolved the fundamental ignorance, which is ignoring that there is no such thing as a solid, separate self. If there's still someone to be frightened, then you may feel more vulnerable. So the path leading up that mountain can be more precarious. And so to respond to what Maggie is asking about is, I would say it's a matter of continuing to sit and don't add to anything that's arising with our ideas about it. Something arises, to add a bunch of analysis or concepts or judgments onto what's already there. It's difficult. because we tend to want to know, we want to explain, we want to cover up, we want to do something about what is arising rather than actually see what it is. So read her question one more time, please.
How do we stop fighting with the unconscious parts of us that are warring with us?
Well, first what we do is what she's already doing. You can't ask that question unless you see that there's unconscious things coming to light. Unconscious things, there's some kind of warfare going in the other room, going on around the corner, and we can sense it, we can hear it. We can't see it exactly, we can't find the off switch, but the downside is what Maggie is talking about, is it can be difficult. That's why it's called a spiritual path, because you're actually on a path where you're slowly going to be more and more unmasking, uncovering, and going down into deeper layers of consciousness, deeper layers of awareness. That can be very frightening to ego or self-centeredness. So it just becomes very, very scary. And so most of the time, without a spiritual path, without a teacher, without a Sangha or community, and without a teaching, especially a teaching that's 2,500 years old, most of it, a lot of it, is we just say, I'm not doing this. I'm going to go back into and find some temporary situation that will help. That may be drugs. It may be, I'm just going to play golf every day. So a way of just kind of distracting yourself. Again, it's not wrong. It's just the way that all the different ways that we have of dealing with our discomfort or our fear or our difficulty. This is one of them. This is a way to do this that actually transcends this world, which Maggie's question there is asking about. The question she's asking, she couldn't ask unless she spent some time really realizing there's a lot of things that seem to be, for lack of a better word, unconscious. It's like something rattling in the back room, and I can't quite, how do I think her word was stop. So first of all, there has to be a realization you don't have to stop it. You don't have to stop it. It has to be seen. If you see what it is, then you see the way in which that which you previously wanted to stop, where it's getting its fuel, where it's getting its energy from. And then you can possibly address that. You can stop fueling it, and that way it will start to die out. Of course, there's no guarantees of anything. I'm not here to sell anything. Questions?
Shane from San Clemente.
Yes.
He asks, of the three jewels, which is the most important?
Sangha. Community. Of course, you can't have Sangha without the first two. So, but Sangha, yes.
Why is it that the song is the most important?
Well, actually, it's not. But I have to say something, and I felt like saying that, so I did. So I think the reason I say it is because it's the one that's the most neglected. We study the teachings. I know lots of people who call themselves Buddhists. Some of them are in prisons who call themselves Buddhists, but refuse to relate with Sangha, because Sangha is very difficult. When you study the teachings, you can kind of make it your own. You know, you can say, okay, life is suffering, the cause of desire, the goal of cessation, and the path is Shila, Samadhi, and Prajna, or discipline, meditation, and wisdom. Okay, I can do that. I'll do that. I'll meditate, I'll study, I'll meditate, I'll study, I'll meditate or study. But I'm not going to hang out with those bozos that think they know what the Dharma is, and they got it all wrong. And when they talk about it, they act like they know everything. So that's why Sangha is so important. It's important to sit and talk with other people who are studying this incredible teaching of the Buddha and experience the way they bring their neurosis, their difficulty, their challenges to that situation, interact with others. It really that functions like a mirror. It helps you really realize where you're at on this path, and if there's going to be an understanding that deals directly with the self-centeredness, you have to start relating with the way you project onto others, because we do it all the time. More. Goes on.
In relating with community, you talked about the Sangha,
Yes.
either here or the whole worldwide.
Mhm.
What is there a difference between tolerating or accepting and being with?
Yeah, yes, tolerating means that you already don't care for it, you don't like it, you're going to just tolerate it, which means you're going to do this. I'll just tolerate it. Because you're not tolerating if you're looking right at it and you're feeling ferocious. The only way you can really sometimes tolerate is just to kind of shut it out or ignore, or distract yourself with something else, And so I'll just tolerate it. That's what we do. And the next one was what?
Accepting.
Accepting means that you're going to have some kind of an artificial or conceptual accepting of it. So you'll never hear me say just accept anything. Accept, reject, look away are all the three poisons. They're the three things that keep you from understanding what is fundamentally true, is that you're not a separate being. Go ahead. Next one.
What if there's nothing to say about it or do?
Doesn't sound too bad to me. What's next?
So how can we be with ourselves or with out there without saying something or doing something? Or
You might not be able to. That's why I sometimes say, if you need to carry a picket sign and go out, and we shouldn't, go over to Flint, with impeach the governor or something. If you need to do that, you won't be able to help it. You'll just go do it. I'm not promoting it. I'm not stopping it. I'm not doing anything with it. I'm just saying that don't do anything unless you have to. And this way, it's like patience. Then you'll wait a while and see do I really have to do that? Because you shouldn't do it out of guesswork. You should do it out of. And so, hold still. Go ahead. So, what was the last part of that? What's the difference, or how?
Tolerating and accepting or being with.
Yeah, being with is the way to be with something is you don't know what it is. Because if you know what it is, then you have to either tolerate it, you have to accept it, you have to reject it. But if you don't know what it is, this is acknowledging all the hidden causes and conditions that lead up to any given situation. It's called, in the Buddhist teaching, it's called dependent origination. And if it's true what the Buddha said, that everything is dependently arisen, that nothing comes from its own side as a solid separate self, if that's true, which it looks like it is, then you aren't going to be able to see all of the causes and conditions that create any given situation. So to be with something means to be with it as you see it and as you perceive it. Don't go to war with it. I mean, actually have respect for other people's intelligence and their confusion. Because if you don't have respect for that, then we end up fighting with people. The person to practice on is this one. That's why we have sit down, look at the wall, and look at the way you keep fighting with your own mind. That's one of the things about, for instance, Maggie was just in retreat. Other people, you've been and done long retreats. You notice when you're in retreat, it's one of the reasons we have that happen here. When you're in retreat, you're totally by yourself. All you do is eat, sleep, study a little bit of the Dharma, and meditate all day long, or most of the day. And it's pretty hard after several days to see there's nobody there but you. So if you're having any kind of difficulty or warfare, you're probably having it with yourself, or because there's no one there to blame. So it's a powerful practice. Yes.
So if you're sitting there and you don't have anything to say, and you find yourself not doing anything, but you're still intensely uncomfortable with the situation.
Yeah.
So you don't feel like you're doing anything out there, but it's not pleasant here. What do you do?
Just look at it. Don't make assumptions when you're having intense negativity. The more you can it's almost like a scientist who's run into something that he or she doesn't understand. Don't do anything with it. Now this doesn't mean you shouldn't do something, but hold off as long as you can so that which is dependently arisen starts to show up as a pathway to working with that negativity. So the longer you can wait, it's called patience, a common word that's slung around all the time by people that don't know what it means. But it's actually just waiting to see what's there. And if you're actually doing that as I'm trying to present it, it doesn't feel like waiting. It feels more like just looking at it. Like if you can sit in a doctor's office where you don't want to know when they're going to call you, how it feels to sit there and go. Or if you got a laptop, then it's not so bad. But it's not exactly waiting. It's more like watching something until the opening that you personally may need to move into that and maybe object to something, or maybe agree or something. But it would be more coming out of your awareness or your consciousness about it, rather than some kind of analysis and opinions and ideas and like that. So it's difficult because sometimes we don't feel so good. So that's why it seems to be necessary to make friends with yourself on the cushion, all by yourself, so that once you've made friends with this, then it's pretty hard to find any enemies, because everyone is, if you still have an enemy in here somewhere, then we tend to project that enemy out on other people who are giving us difficulty or we think that are giving us difficulty. Yes.
How can we accommodate subtle forms of warfare like shame that don't have really definite manifestations?
Yeah, it's a good one. So definite forms, indefinite forms. The way that I would, there's lots of ways I think I would work with that individually, which I can talk to you more about that. We already have talked about that somewhat. But I think the kind of more of a broad way of relating to it is to say, try to stay, rather than try to find the blame or the something that is triggering it, to actually look at what has been triggered. So we know there's some kind of a trigger, but to look at what has been triggered. So that involves going into the shame and actually feeling that. Feel yourself all the way through it, because quite often what we do is we either enforce the shame. Yes, I am I am this person that feels so terrible or feels shamed, or else I don't feel this way. I don't know why this is happening to me, and we try to get out of it. So we struggle with it, and that kind of struggle does not show up like an outward warfare, but it is a kind of subtle warfare that's deep in our mind, our heart. That is it's very painful. Can be just as we all know that psychological, personal suffering can be just as difficult as, or maybe more difficult than actual physical difficulty. But I would say awareness, looking into it as deeply as you can. We could talk about it at some other point. Michael.
Could you comment on the Sangha as a place to practice to be the fool?
A place to what?
Practice being the fool.
Yeah, practice being the fool. Well, I don't know, I'm doing it. I don't feel like that I'm, like I know everything. That's why I'm sitting up here. I'm just sitting up here because I feel like I can present what I've been looking at for a long time. Maybe somebody will be helped by it. But I think being a fool, Michael's referring to a teaching that Trungpa Rinpoche talks about, I think in Cutting Through, about just a willingness to be foolish and to not constantly defend ourselves against, make sure we're always right and we never look bad. We're concerned about what other people think. And so if you're in a group where everyone in here is you're studying with a group of people, the Sangha, where everybody's working on their mind and everybody is trying as much as they can to be genuine, to be sincere, to be upright, to not be deceptive with themselves or others, and to be kind, even though they might not always feel like being kind, then I think that if you're in that kind of a situation over and over and over again, then any kind of foolishness is going to present itself. More? That's a good question. And then you will be able to deal with it. People help each other by mirroring each other. Yes. Yes.
The necessity to be a fool is that is there a reason for that necessity to be the fool?
I think the simple way of saying it is what Rinpoche is saying, and I didn't chat with him about it, so I don't know for sure, but the way it looks over here is it's a way of working with self-centeredness or ego. We have so much pride, kind of, even if you don't see it as pride, we have a kind of a protective layer so that we never look foolish. So we're always kind of careful how we're acting, what we're saying. And so there's the idea of being a fool. It means that you're willing to be a person who doesn't have a clue, or a person who maybe makes mistakes, or when we say mistakes, just didn't do something the way somebody else expected. So there's a willingness to be open that way and be generous. It's another kind of generosity, kind of giving of yourself to just be with people and be with your own foolishness, be with the foolishness of others. Yeah, not easy. Yes.
Three questions, one
Yes.
from Sandra, one from Shane, and one from Maggie.
Uh-huh.
So from Sandra out in New York,
Sandra, we're gonna see you in a couple of weeks.
He asks, is taking refuge an early reference point which is gradually seen as groundless?
Taking refuge, early reference point that is seen as groundless, yes. Yeah, there really isn't anything to take refuge in. That's why the ultimate teachings of the Buddha is nothing is separate. But we have to start somewhere. So we start with the provisional teachings that we're here and we don't feel so good. So we talk to somebody, enter into a situation like this where the person who's supposedly, you know, in a chair like this and, you know, wearing a bathrobe, you know, who says, maybe you should just sit down and look at your mind for a couple of years. Why not? I mean, I've been around for a long time. I was gonna still spend some time doing this. So, and then taking refuge in the Buddha is just another way of kind of laminating yourself, because the ego or the self-centeredness does not want to do this. Ego wants to be out and just mill around and find things that are entertaining or enjoyable or temporary valid. Just, again, it's not wrong. It's just what most of the world is doing. Most of the world is doing this. The problem with this, if you live forever, that would be fine. If I knew I was going to live forever, I wouldn't be here. I'd be playing golf. Because first time I played golf, and I played it twice, I realized this would take me about 4 or 5 lifetimes to learn. I'm that bad at it. But I kind of liked swinging a club at a ball. It was fun to do that. It's just that when I did that, I wasn't willing to be a fool. And I saw that everybody thought I was a fool because I was even out there on the links with them, who were all making holes in one. I really stood right next to somebody that did that. So, coming back to the question again, I think that the groundlessness is something that needs to be discovered oneself. And when that happens, there's neither an attachment to a self, nor is there attachment to ideas. There's not even an attachment to Buddhism. But Buddhism is not a belief system. It may start that way and it may function somewhat that way, but the ultimate realization of Buddhism is that you actually transcend it. If you understand Buddhism, Buddhism vanishes. It's like knowing what a ladder is for, climbing the ladder, or knowing what a boat is for, it might be better, and floating across the stream and getting off on the land. Buddhism vanishes when you've actually fulfilled what the teachings are. The only way you would deal with that boat again is to show someone else how to use it. You may or may not do that. You may just stay over there and play golf. Yes.
Shane asks, what do you mean by project onto others?
I'm saying that you have a negative feeling about something, and you don't want to say take responsibility for it. When I say take, I'm saying see that you're actually causing some of that, and you may be causing some of that out of your own tendency to want to shove down emotions instead of see how they feel like, what they actually are. We want to push this down, and then when it pops up somewhere else, and if it gets painful, then we start looking around for anything. If we see it, somebody can just scowl at you, and that's enough of a trigger to where you start thinking, who are you so upset about? You know, we want to get that out onto somebody else. We want to fight with somebody. And the person says, man, I'm fine. We're good. We're cool. But they want to get away from you because they feel like, then they start to get triggered because we go after somebody and then their triggers get triggered. The next thing you've got, World War III. So it's an imaginary projection. There's a very technical word for this. It is called parikalpita, and it means the imputed nature. In other words, the imaginary. Our imaginations are so powerful. I can create things right now in your minds. I don't know if you say, I can say, like I did a little while ago, I said, what color was that condor? Purple condor. I changed my mind. Now it's pink. See, and then you see, if you know what a condor looks like, you probably see one in your own mind. Well, did I create that or did you? Or did we both do it? And is there anything even created or not? Do you believe it or not? It's kind of there and it's not there. But 3 weeks from now, you can go back to that memory and still find that. You might be able to, that might be more vivid or just as vivid as your memory of being in the Zendo. If the Zendo memory disappears and all you've got is a condor, then I would say, Give it a name. Make friends with them. More.
From Maggie. again.
Maggie. Mhm.
Should we tune into and note the physical sensations that arise with negativity?
Yes. So, and I could say physical sensations, also everything. When negativity arises, look at the colors that are in front of you. Use your other five senses besides the thinking mind. The thinking mind is always churning up all kinds of stuff. But use your other senses. Don't forget gravity. You couldn't be here without gravity. You couldn't walk, you couldn't sit, you couldn't digest your food, and a whole bunch of other things I won't mention. You couldn't do it. It wouldn't work. You gotta have gravity going. Give me that. I'll take that. Yeah. Did I answer the question? Good. Any other questions? Yes, sir. What is your name, sir?
Chris.
Chris, that's right.
What is the best way to break through hardened barriers in your mind?
So look who you're talking to. You know, I mean, when I say best way, I haven't tried every way, but I know that if you go and Google, you go into Wikipedia, you'll find about 300 to 400 different kinds of therapy. That means that there's 300 to 400 that we know about, that Wikipedia knows about. And a lot of those are really well known, and some of them are very effective, probably help really well to work, provisionally or, with certain aspects of the mind. Psychoanalysis is still around. So there's all kinds of ways. There's the way of just quite often people use drugs. There's nothing wrong. If somebody's really suffering and you can find a drug that'll help tamp that down, then that might be what that person needs to do. But then another person might want to work with it in a different way. And so since you're asking me the question, you're basically telling me that you're ready for the kind of answer I'm going to give you. And I would say, insofar as you can. How old are you, Chris?
42.
You're 42.
Yes.
You look pretty good for 42. Look younger than that. Because I don't, it's not a compliment.
No, it's not. Trust me. I don't feel like it.
I'm so old that everybody looks like a kid. Does that work?
Yeah.
So I would say, find out who you are. Train your mind. You don't have to be a Buddhist. You don't have to come into a place like this, but spend some time holding still. Since everything is from the time you wake up in the morning, we're constantly in motion. Body, speech, and mind. Body and mind are not separate. They separate to do their functions, but sometimes they separate so much that you can drive from here to the grocery store and your mind can be in Arkansas rehashing a conversation we had with somebody there 3 years ago and what you should have said to them was blah, 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 blah. And the next thing you know, you're at the store. Your mind, the consciousness, awareness is discontinuous. It is so discontinuous that you can't track all the little particles. That is the power of consciousness, and that is also the vulnerability of it, the same thing, which is what Sheldon is experiencing. More and more vulnerable. He's beginning to see how sensitive his mind is, how sensitive and how open, how many different aspects and parts there are. So I would say that which sees can't be seen. I'll say it again. That which sees can't be seen. You can't find a self. There's no self. But if you understand that, then that which sees becomes sovereign. It's like a king or a queen. Then you know who you are. You can't be threatened anymore. I'm not saying you can't suffer. I'm not saying that you're going to be impervious to migraines or to anything, or to be even, I'm not saying if somebody jumps out to scare you, you won't have to use the bathroom. You might. So I'm not saying but you're open, and you would see more clearly what it is that you just mentioned a minute ago. And so I would say, hold still, keep all the senses open, and watch what continues. If you hold as still as you can, and this doesn't mean if your back's sore, then stretch a little bit, and then go back to being still. Stay as still as you can for as long as you can, without being hard on yourself. A lot of Zen. The holding still and a lot of the hitting with sticks. This is just decoration. Have you had to hit anybody with this? But in the past, Zen, there's stories of whacking people and things like that. We don't do that here. So I would say hold still and watch what continues to move. And over time, at some point, you will begin to see the way that which moves is about the way you confuse yourself and add to the suffering by trying to stuff it or fight with it or make excuses for it. Those are the three kinds. We try to stuff it, ignorance. We try to fight with it, aggression, or we try to make excuses or blame others, passion. So meditate. Good luck. We're at the end of our time. Is there any final questions from anyone? Have a question from, no questions, okay. Lisa, you have a question? No? Okay, well, I made myself very clear if there's no questions. Thank you. We can dedicate them, right?
In the back of your yellow chant books is the dedication of merit. We also have donation boxes in the hallway. Or you can go online and donate via our website.
I'll take mine.
Thank you.
May the merit of this penetrate into all places so that we and every sentient being together can realize the Buddha's way. Jiro san shi shi hu shi son gu sa moko sa the 10 directions, the 3 worlds, all Buddhas, all venerable ones, Bodhisattvas, Mahasattvas, the great Prajna Paramita,